You can let me know already. Please. Thank you. So John, how's that Okay, we'll call to order the budget, or excuse me, the council workshop for Tuesday, July 19th. Item B on our agenda is for the workshop is budget discussion. So you all got your packet and stuff. Jenny, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Mayor Ryan. Good evening, members of the council. Tonight, we're going to start off kind of diving into a variety of budget-related topics. This just kind of gets us started off with some of the bigger questions with respect to salaries and benefits, and then giving you a little bit of a sense of what's happening right now with inflation, with some other things going on. We'll talk about our property values as it relates potentially to our levy. And if there's questions, comments, thoughts as far as how staff starts to work through our budget process before we bring department budgets to you, that would be great as well. So I'm gonna hopefully get this mouse going here. Perfect. Okay, so tonight I'm gonna touch on the current CPI index. We'll talk about salaries and health insurance, general fund revenues and debt service. Our 2022 estimated market values from the county from our Board of Appeal meeting in April, and how that relates to our tax impact model and how we use those things together. So as everybody knows, the CPI keeps climbing. My memo reflected May's numbers, but as of June, the CPI index for the Midwest region was at 9.5%. So staff is working from an operations budget perspective on how that impacts the budget, utilities, supplies, things we're seeing, higher delivery fees incorporated into our purchases and things like that. Any questions or feedback? I mean, it is what it is right now, but certainly want to just pause to offer any comments or council questions. No.
It's a 40-year high.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think it'll exceed what it did in 1981 with 11.3%, but
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely has an impact for sure. Okay, we will definitely talk more about that as over the next couple of months as well. So for salaries and health insurance, as I mentioned in my memo, both of our union contracts are settled for 2023, which is great when we have certain pieces to the puzzle already established, like those contracts are. What we try to do to the extent possible, it's not a perfect system because contracts have different goals and needs and things within the different employee groups, but we try to be consistent across the board with as many employee groups as we can. And so what I did was for initial purposes for tonight, to give you some numbers, I've incorporated the same cost of living and health insurance increases that our supervisor union contract reflects for 2023 into the non-union staff. So we have our supervisor's contract, our Teamsters, which is our police officer contract, and then we have, I refer to the non-union staff, which is the rest of the general city staff. So step movement for all eligible staff, meaning if you have a step to move forward, you would get that. A 5% cost of living increase from this year. And then our health insurance contribution. So we would go from $821.36 to $840 for those on the single plan. So that reflects the $18.64 per month, or a 2.3% increase for those on the single plan. And then from $1,268.14 to $1,331.54 if you're on the family plan per month. The $63.40 is the dollar increase per month, or a 5% increase. The Teamsters plan does not offer a single option, but they do have the same family numbers as reflected here. So all of the family health insurance contribution would be the same across the board. For Teamsters, I have identified in my memo as well their market adjustment for next year and their COLA, so the 7.18 market adjustment and the 3% COLA, which is a little bit different than the supervisor contract with a 5% COLA. So again, it's just how those negotiations work out. But I wanted to at least try to reflect some consistencies where possible to get us a starting point. So when I take all of that together, and we haven't met with department heads yet on their individual budgets. So there is sometimes if we have part-time staff wages or things like that, that the department head may want to look at it a little bit differently than what I initially put forward in numbers, but this gives you a good guess for where things are landing. I have itemized by department to include those assumptions. And the first group, let me see if I can use my mouse up. So the first half of the group are general fund. So these are the general fund departments. And then the enterprise fund departments in the second group there. So all in total, the increase in proposed wages with these assumptions for the general fund only would be the $101,193. And when we like to talk about what does that mean to our levy, it would reflect a 4% levy impact. So really out of the gate, when we're talking about what we know to be staffing wages as they are rolling forward to next year, we'll have a 4% increase to the levy. Questions, comments, changes in assumptions? I mean, anything you want me to look at for next month or for Maggie and our meeting with departments?
Where are we at with department heads getting their budgets in? I mean, I don't know when you were planning on starting to meet with them and stuff.
All the meetings are scheduled. July is the month they get all of their reports and everything from Maggie, the mid to end June. And then July is when we meet with them. They submit sort of their first round of budget information to us. We go through it. Then Maggie puts it into our master spreadsheet with all the departments. And so there will be at least a first run for you to see in August. Those would be the two meetings that we have scheduled. So we split the departments half and half so that you can talk to each department head and see kind of what their goals are for next year and things like that. But they've all been scheduled. I think
Okay.
we're doing most of all of them next week.
Okay.
We marathon.
Okay.
Yes,
Good.
yes.
Okay.
Now, and will they be putting in those amortizations for equipment and buildings and so forth, or is that going to be, are they working with that this year?
Yes, yes. So they will have their operating budgets, capital improvement plans, including equipment. Hopefully we'll get more of a step forward with the building component. I know that's being worked on as well, so we can see what that looks like. And then their strategic plan impacts to their department based off of the council's broad strategic plan goals. Yes.
Has there been much feedback since we implemented this last year on how, from the department heads? Yes, no, like it, don't like it, confusion?
I would say a little bit all of the above. It's a first year for something. And so, I tried to relay that we're going to have a learning curve with that, as we all will. I think the biggest feedback that I received was as much council direction that can be given on the front end so that we're not going one direction and then having to go back a different direction would be helpful. So if, let's just say the city council said 4% looks like a great number, we want to hold it there for next year. Well, that's going to be really difficult, right? With inflation and everything going on. But just as an example, they would know likely there aren't going to be any bigger things talked about for next year. So as much as we're working through it, and I struggle with that a little bit because in part, I want to see all the information to have a good picture of what the needs are, but it is a lot of work to put that in there. So there's just a balance there. I think we did a great job moving forward and implementing as much as we did. I'd like to see, I think we have a couple of departments left to implement the funding matrix for the capital improvement plan. So I want to make sure we get that fully implemented this year as well. So everyone's on that schedule. And just keep moving forward is whatever pace we can do. Yeah, great question.
It's just a comment from me. I'm just thinking that we had like it was just a little over 7% for the police, the union.
Yeah.
7.18, I think it was something like that. We went up with the contract as well as 5% for non-union and then the supervisors, right?
Yeah.
For both of them.
Well, the non-union you can give me the thumbs up to go
Right.
forward with that, or if there's any changes, that's.
And right now for 2022, we're looking at around what was about 8%, so far from January till June, it was sort of like around 8% increase so far in inflation.
Inflation, right?
The
Yes.
CPI.
Yep.
And I'm just thinking that we're now looking at 3% difference there, and I really don't want to sort of get back into where we're lowballed, on the salaries again.
Sure.
We went through all that before to try to make up for that.
Yep.
And the police union was actually more because they had to make up more.
Right.
But I think we need to, that's just a concern I have.
Sure.
I don't want to fall really behind again.
Yep.
And I realize that, we want to try to save as much as possible, but
Yep.
we don't want to find ourselves where we're losing people because of other places scouting them out and taking them out that way.
Sure, certainly. Yeah.
That's just the one thing,
Yep.
comment I had. And then the other is that these matrices that we're making is great.
Yep.
But, and then as far as the overall bolts and nuts and bolts plan, for how we're going to achieve what we want to do, the overall plan for like 1 year, 5 year, 10-year type ideas.
Yep.
And the matrices really work well with that. But in addition, I'm wondering, are we planning anything? Because I'm sure we're going to have to someday purchase some land somewhere.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, are we thinking about how to put allotments away for that or anything like that? Or no, not at this point, I believe, right?
No, we haven't had a formal discussion about that. You've mentioned that a couple times to do that, which I agree with. I think the question would be, do we allocate current unreserved money we have for
Mhm.
that future need? Or is that something we want to pursue other avenues for? That's,
Right.
I think that's, maybe we need to kind of work through some of that.
Yeah, that's my concern. I'd like to get a more better idea of how
Sure.
we're going to handle that.
Okay.
Because I don't want to wait until something pops up and we're not ready to do anything.
Right.
I've heard of that happening before and it will happen again
Yep.
unless we're ready.
Definitely. And if I could, on your comment about wages, I think that you will likely approve later tonight, the Employee Retention Committee. I think that's what it's called. That will be a really, I think, helpful gauge to understand, because you have two components to that, right? You have wages and you have benefits. And where does the money have the bigger punch, so to speak? I'm certainly supportive of that component. We want to keep that in mind. But there's also that in trying to come up with what I hope would be as much flexible options for staff, I think is what I'm seeing is
Mhm.
where we would need to go, because needs are different for everybody. And how can we facilitate that the best way? But yes, that's not to preclude if we want to talk about even running some numbers from a wage perspective with a bigger cost of living. We can certainly do that. If you'd like to know that and not feel like we're getting behind, we can do that. But I just wanted to mention that too, as far as the benefit piece.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to become creative somehow
Yeah,
and to
sure.
handle that so that we don't fall behind again. And
Mhm.
I worry about that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you for that. I
Mhm.
know that's certainly something on everybody's mind, especially coming off of creating that plan to do the compensation study every 3 years, and you felt really good about, we've got something implemented. And then we had the next year, it was coming last year, but it's continuing the way. So,
But it's hard to do anything right now since we don't know what the whole budget looks like yet,
Right.
what the plans are. So maybe later on, we can look at that in more detail.
okay, perfect. And I think a little bit more information later will help be able for each of you to think about some of these options.
Yeah.
So, any other questions right now on wages or
Well, you talk
insurance?
about falling behind, and my personal opinion is that in the next 5 to 7 years in this country, we're gonna have a heck of a hard time doing much. Taxes are gonna go up,
Yeah.
and prices are still gonna go up. And people are hurting. You read the legals in the newspaper, and you're starting to see a lot of mortgage foreclosures.
Mhm.
It's starting up again. And with the food shelf people, they're saying that that's increasing, more people are using them. So I think we have to be in with the people that we are supposed to help govern.
Okay.
And say, if people have to fall back and do things differently and don't have as much to work with for the next 5 to 7 years, then we should be in the same mode.
Sure.
I'm not saying how much,
Yep.
but I don't think it can be, well, we did 7 or 8% last year or 10% the year before. I would like to keep it as close to 4.5 as I can, preferably less if possible.
Sure. I appreciate the,
It's hard. but
yeah, the thought of the taxpayer and the impact. I understand that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to touch on a couple things. It's, I think, helpful each year to talk through it. So just a representation of where our general fund revenues come from. As you can see, a vast majority comes from our property taxes. And so that's where the levy comes into play. So we certify a levy, and that is how the property taxes are generated that come back to us. We have the transfers from other funds that is reflective of the liquor store transfer. So from the Pickle and Spirits of Nisswa, they transferred $265,000 as of this year. That's the amount combined that they transfer to the city, which helps offset the levy that we need to collect from that. We have a handful of other categories: charges for services, permits and fees. When you think of permits and fees, planning and zoning permits, we have smaller mailbox support fees, liquor license fees. We have cemetery plots, burial opening and closing. So we have some of those miscellaneous type revenue generators. So it's not significant, but it is a portion there when you combine it. Intergovernmental, that's monies that come from the state or the county. So we do get some revenues, depending on the legislature and depending on the year. We would see some small cities assistance funding from the state, for example, in certain ways. So, so this is just for you to see. Basically, our property taxes don't account for 100% of the revenues that we need to operate our general fund, but it's definitely a vast majority there. So just a reference for you there. I did also want to touch on our debt service. I thought the council might be interested in where we're at with our debt service. We're coming up in a couple of years, maybe sooner. Tom and I have been talking a lot about that as far as our next street bond. And so I just wanted to share what our debt service outstanding is. So the longest general obligation bond we have out there was issued in 2012. It was originally issued for $1.5 million, and that will set to be complete in 2032. Our 2018 street reconstruction, so we improved 5 or 6 city streets in 2018, and we issued, actually took us a couple years to do that, but we issued that for roughly 1.5 million again. That will be set to complete in 2026. We had another capital improvement plan bond that will be set to complete in 25, and then another bond in 24. So you see, we will have some bonds coming off of our rolls in the next couple of years. And the goal when we issued the 2018 street reconstruction bond was to hopefully keep our debt service as level as possible, so that when we're reissuing bonds, we're timing it at the point when another bond is coming off, we can reissue a new one for the needs of the city. So we will have some opportunity. That's why it's great to be doing the planning now, because sort of, well, let's just issue a bond for that. And I go, well, that's great, but I have a lot of potential departments that might need to issue a bond for something. So whether that's moving forward with city hall improvements, as was presented by Widseth a couple of months ago, we certainly will have street improvement needs, fire department equipment. I mean, there will be the list, and we'll work this year to really compile that some more. But there is opportunity, and obviously those numbers, those issuances are going to grow with inflation and all those things as well. But we certainly will have opportunity in our debt service side from our general obligation lens. Mark, did you have a question? No, okay. We have two bonds on our revenue side. These are both for our sewer plant. In 2012, we had a bond issuance, and that will be complete in 2027. And then our newest general obligation sewer revenue bond, which issued on 2020, that will go out to 2040. So that's going to take a little while. Both of these bonds are fully backed by the taxing authority of the city. That's why they're a general obligation bond, but we use the revenues from the sewer fund to pay for that. So it's sort of a double application there. So it will be nice once we only have one bond left to pay on for our sewer fund. I think that will help just free up some of those funds and from an operation perspective. But we're also planning on future lift station upgrades and things like that with the sewer fund. So just wanted to give you that. Now you have it for reference if you have an interest. Any questions on our current debt schedule? Good. Okay. Oh, I figured you were going to do that to me. My link to the, hold on one sec. The next two slides were set up the same way, so got that going here. Hold on. There it is. Okay. So this was the handout the county provided to us during our Board of Appeal meeting in April. Which is a great snapshot on what our market values, what is happening with our market values within the city over the past year. As you can see, if I go back a couple of years, in 2020, the change over 2019 estimated market values was 4.61%. And then in 21, it was 8.4%. And as you can see in 22, it's 32.7%. So we have all seen the increase in real estate prices and our impacts probably in our own valuations, but that's a significant increase. And while we certainly have seen new homes constructed, we're pretty steady in how we see that every year. Just I'd say it's a nice steady line increase. We don't have a 200 home development or something like that coming in. And so the valuation growth here is really largely reflected on the existing homes in the tax base that there is now. So we probably have all seen our valuations increase on our own properties, which makes this number for me a little bit of a challenge. And so we'll talk about that. There's some information as far as the sales and things like that. And, these are the residential, seasonal, and commercial are our largest buckets for tax base. And here's just a graphic as far as what that looks like, that breakout. Now, a couple of years ago, when we had our financial advisors, PFM, create this tax impact model, I want to make sure we remember from last year, since it's been about a year since we've talked about it. This model reflects what we typically see when there's a school bond referendum and they're trying to explain what that referendum will look like. So, your valuation for your home, you'll see a $35 increase or something like that. So it's how they try to get to relate for people to understand what that means. And so what we do here is they created this for us, and we have residential homestead classification, we have commercial and industrial apartments. So we have the different classifications, seasonal, recreational here at the bottom. And we can choose the different valuation denominations, if you will. We can make this what it is, but we try to be at least most people can get close to whatever their value is by looking at a line item and getting close to it. And so the model will say on the left-hand side, the scenario A is going to be what our current tax base and levy is. So our current tax base, and what you see here on the back end of the spreadsheet, there are lots of numbers, and we get into the larger valuation numbers that are reflected here. But how it's spread on the levy gets into the formula as far as involving that tax capacity. But the spreadsheet is set up to do what it needs to do. And so we have our net tax capacity, which is a formula of the full estimated market value. We have our levy. So our current levy for 2022 is the $2,786,000. And then this is your corresponding tax amount. So what I did was, for purposes of today, I wanted to give you an illustration and something to think about, so that as we talk about this more during our budget meetings, we have maybe a direction to go. So I plugged in the new numbers based on the 2022 valuations. So we use 2022 valuations for the pay 2023 year. And that gives us a net tax capacity. The percentage is actually the 29.65. It's close to the 32%, but it's again just a formula, how the formula works. And then I said, okay, well, I know that we're talking around the 30% range, the 32% market value, 29 and some change for the tax capacity. I'm just going to plug in a 25% increase to our levy just to see. So I plugged in a 25% increase to give you a frame of reference. And so again, this wouldn't factor in if you had an increase in valuation to your home, but if we were to look at that first line and say, if you had a $100,000 home in 21 and a $100,000 home in 22, you would actually see a tax decrease of, is that $8? I can't see that far. Even with a 25% levy increase, because of that increase in the estimated market value citywide. So that makes it really interesting. Last year when we were talking about it, we had that 8% increase in valuations. And so we ended up with an 11% levy, and we needed to do some things and get some things accomplished. And so there was, I think, a very intentional effort by the council to keep it close, but getting the things done we needed to get done. So to Mark's point about wages, for example, well, how does that play into when we're looking at potentially even a significant levy increase, still having not a increase in actual tax due to a taxpayer? So I will keep working on scenarios and things to help the council walk through that, but I certainly would be open to your feedback or thoughts, questions, things I need to put together. Does this make sense, how this is laid out? I want to make sure that at least at the beginning point. Okay, good. It's been a really great tool for us to use, because at the end of the day, I think it's all about the dollars and cents for someone and what does that mean for them. We can control what we can at the city level, but this at least helps give them a frame of reference, so.
I had one question is
Yeah.
historically, has the values of the property in Nisswa ever gone down very
Yes,
much?
yes, very much. I would have to go back and look. I can actually, well, I can get that to you, but yes, I'm gonna say 08, 9, 10 timeframe. We
Mhm.
probably saw a 4 or 5% decrease in value. So not, I mean, not significant if, you wanna think of
Right.
it that way, but yes, we have seen that.
I'd sort of like to know that,
Yeah.
what it was historically.
I will get that to the council, absolutely. In an ideal world, you want to be able to, when things are growing and we're seeing more activity in the city, we obviously want to, I would hope anyways, want to grow our services and what we do to match that. So as we're seeing the development of new homes and all of that, we want to make sure that we can provide the service and we have the capacity to do that. And then when there are times when things slow down and gets quiet, you hopefully want to be able to hold and maintain, be steady with what you're doing. Doesn't always work out exactly, but I think that's the goal. Questions?
Any questions?
I don't have any questions. No, it's just obviously such an ordinary economic time we're in right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's difficult for the taxpayer. It's difficult for us.
Yeah.
It's a hard decision that have to be made, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Certainly with the inflation as it is, and then you think of the valuation situation, it makes it interesting on how you make that work.
Well, it's just on a macro sense, you don't see enough catalysts that are going to potentially pull it back to be able to accommodate us forecasting it to not exceed what we would maybe predict it to be even now. Just gut feeling, it feels like it could go even higher, CPI,
Sure.
but 11.3, I don't know.
Close with a bit.
Yeah, it's close, too close.
What about some of the COVID money that we're getting from the federal government? It's, if you put them all together, it's quite a pile. How much of that can be used in a regular budget planning?
We can use what did we receive? 229,000 minus the 25,000 that we allocated to the food shelf. So we're right about 200, I'm just going to say. We can use that for anything the city deems appropriate within our operations that we are doing currently. So yes, you could use it to offset your operating budget if the council wanted to do that. If I was reading into your question correctly, yes.
But if we did that, that offsets the budget or the operating budget, say you use the $200,000 for that. So that's what?
1%.
No, that's how many levy points? It's
Eight.
Eight levy
Yeah.
points. So
Yep.
it's 8% basically. But once that's gone, then that 8% either has to come out of the operating levy or get made up some other way.
Yeah.
So it's a rob Peter, pay Paul thing,
Double-edged sword.
but unless there's things that we find out during the budget process that, hey, we have this money here, instead of the department having a budget for that, we can boom, do that,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, one-time purchases versus recurring
Mhm.
is usually cleaner or simpler, but
This scenario tax impact model is really helpful for me, I think. I really like this. And for me, if we have a lot of increase in value, at that time, you have a lot more income that you can use for services, but if it ever shrinks, now you're in real trouble if you get up to a certain level. So it'd be sort of nice to be able to, knowing in the future, if we have that future plan put in place, like what I'm always used to in business is you have that 1, 5, 10-year plan, and you know what you're going to have to do. So then you start to put away for that, and put away like a fund for the rainy days when that's something might happen. But especially for like land purchase, I keep thinking land purchases, that's a big one. If we go into have our own water system, water tower, the water system, big ticket items like that. And this is the time when if you could keep it even tax neutral in a sense with this model. Yet you can put that money away rather than a tax cut. I mean, I always love to give tax cuts. I'd love it myself, but I think we need to prepare for the future and times when problems will occur. Because like Jesse said, this is a very exceptional year. And these last couple of years have been very exceptional.
Gonna get worse.
Next year could it be even more exceptional?
Exactly.
I just don't.
We just don't
I'm young.
know.
I haven't even seen anything like this, and I hope we never do in my lifetime again. But
Right.
again, I don't see any catalysts that are going to steer this thing any different from where it's at right now for 2023 and even for 24. We are still. I just don't see anything that is going to be able to bring it even down to say 5%.
Yeah.
CPI down to 5%.
It's very, very possible.
Yeah.
Or it could crash and burn, we go down and, you never know what will happen. That's the crystal ball, and we really can't figure that out. But as much as possible to use this money very smartly as a taxpayer, it'd be nice to be able to put that away if it's possible, and then prepare for those opportunities that might come up in the future.
I agree. Something that as we just went through this process last year, really for the first time, and as I was reflecting on it early this year, thinking I didn't create, I think, that final document to know some of those answers to the questions. What's the 1, 5, 10 years? So that is on my to-do this year to hopefully provide a nice roadmap to say, how are we prioritizing each category within our strategic plan, and what are we doing? I think that would help the community understand the vision, understand the why behind, if there is an increase, what is that going towards? And so, yes, I think that would be very helpful. We can all see that. I know staff has also mentioned, what are those from a council perspective, what are the most important priorities, and what are we going to look at and talk about first and fund first, and then how does everything else fall in line, or is this a rotating thing every year? Is there opportunity for that? What does that look like? So I think they're on board with that. It's just a matter of what does that look like. So as best as we can provide that picture for them would be helpful as well.
For Jenny.
So thank you. For August, we have 2 workshops scheduled. You will hear from half of the departments in one workshop and the other half in the other workshop. As I mentioned, they'll bring forward their operating budget, capital improvement plan, and strategic plan goals for the upcoming year. And then hopefully that will give you a nice sense of where things are, what they're planning on for next year, what we're looking to do, and hopefully some initial cost thoughts on that, so we can start to work through prioritizing and kind of creating that roadmap. If there's any questions between then, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you.
And we're meeting at 5:30 on the 16th.
Yes,
I
I
have
think
all
we
of
will
them.
need time
Okay.
on the 16th. Yes,
Good to know.
yes, just to not rush. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else? Otherwise, we can adjourn and we'll wait for the council meeting. Okay. Sound good?
Sounds good.
So be it. So we'll
Motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.